All right, so, we always appreciate listener feedback, and you guys have really sent in some interesting stuff this time. It's all kind of centered around this idea of using fear strategically
Mhm.
and not in the way you might immediately think. It's not about brute force. It's more about how you can use uncertainty and panic to your advantage.
Right. And sometimes that can be way more effective than just going head to head with somebody.
It really makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
Like, how is it that sometimes causing chaos can be the smarter play?
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff.
So we're diving into all that today.
Mm.
I think a good place to start is with this book, The 33 Strategies of War.
Okay.
We've gotten a ton of requests about it,
Hmm.
specifically this section that talks about sowing uncertainty and panic. And I think that really gets to the heart of what so many of you are curious about.
Absolutely. That's a key piece of the puzzle.
So for this deep dive, our mission is to really unpack this strategy, see how it works in theory, and then look at some real-world examples of how it's been used and what the impact has been.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's start with the fundamentals. What is this Strategy 33 all about?
At its core, it's about recognizing that creating widespread panic and confusion can be incredibly effective in weakening your enemies. It can lead to victory without even having to engage in direct confrontation.
So it's not about brute strength. It's about exploiting those psychological vulnerabilities.
Right. When fear takes hold, people don't think straight. They make bad decisions. They lose trust in each other. They start to fall apart from the inside.
And that's what you're ultimately aiming for, that internal collapse.
Exactly. It's about creating the conditions for your adversaries to defeat themselves.
One of the things that really struck me when I was reading this was this concept of a chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about one scary event. It's about how that initial shock can trigger a cascade of fear and uncertainty.
Right. It's like a ripple effect.
So can you walk us through that a little bit? How does this chain reaction actually play out?
Well, think of it like this. You strike at a point that causes maximum confusion and fear. This could be a physical attack or it could be something more psychological. But the key is that it's unexpected. It throws people off balance. And then that fear starts to spread. It becomes contagious. People start to overreact. They make decisions based on incomplete information. Rumors start flying. Trust breaks down. And pretty soon you have a full-blown panic on your hands.
So it's like that initial shock is just the catalyst, and then the fear itself becomes the real weapon.
Yeah, exactly. The fear feeds on itself. It becomes self-sustaining.
It's kind of chilling when you think about it. The source material actually uses a really vivid historical example to illustrate this.
Okay.
It talks about the Mongol conquests under Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
And, obviously they were known for their military prowess. But it sounds like there was a whole other level to their strategy.
There was. It was a
Yeah.
very calculated use of psychological warfare.
So how did that work?
Well, one of the things they did was they deliberately cultivated a reputation for extreme brutality. Like after they conquered a city, they would often completely destroy it. Sometimes they'd even leave behind piles of skulls as a warning to others.
Wow. It's hard to even imagine. But I guess the message was pretty clear.
It was resist us, and this will be your fate.
And it worked, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Apparently, tons of cities surrendered without a fight, just out of sheer terror of what the Mongols might do to them.
They understood that inspiring fear was often more effective than brute force.
Yeah, it's like they won half the battle before they even showed up.
Exactly.
So the source material lays out the three main outcomes that this kind of strategy aims to achieve.
Okay.
One, you have disorganized enemies making bad decisions. Two, resistance weakens, leading to surrender. And three, the panic sort of takes on a life of its own.
Those are the hallmarks.
But here's the thing, right? This isn't just some ancient military tactic.
Yeah.
These principles of sowing uncertainty and panic, they show up everywhere.
They do. It's a fundamental aspect of human psychology.
Like in business, for example.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about how companies try to undermine their competitors.
Yeah.
They might spread rumors about their products being unsafe.
Right. Or question their financial stability.
Yeah. And it's not a direct attack, but it can create this cloud of doubt that really damages the competitor's reputation.
It's all about eroding trust.
And then in politics, oh, man, fear is like the go-to tactic.
It's a powerful tool, unfortunately.
Candidates constantly try to scare voters by exaggerating threats, playing on anxieties. It's all about manipulating people's emotions.
And it can be very effective.
And even in our personal lives, think about how you might try to gain an advantage in a negotiation. If you can make the other person feel uncertain or anxious, they're more likely to make concessions.
Right. You're essentially exploiting their psychological vulnerabilities.
So this stuff is all around us. But I think one of the most striking examples of how this strategy is being used today is in the realm of cyber warfare.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
Because it's not about physical armies clashing, but it's still about creating disruption and ultimately achieving a kind of victory through fear and uncertainty.
That's a whole new battlefield.
So how does this work in the digital world?
Well, think about all the ways that hackers can disrupt our lives. They can spread disinformation. They can attack critical infrastructure like power grids or financial systems. And even if they don't actually cause physical damage, they can create this pervasive fear that such an attack is imminent.
So it's the fear itself that becomes the weapon.
Exactly.
And the result is that governments and corporations and even individuals start to panic. They don't know what information to trust. They're constantly on edge. It creates this climate of suspicion and paranoia. And that could lead to some pretty serious consequences.
Absolutely.
Like poor decision-making, economic instability, even social unrest. So it's a really powerful and dangerous strategy.
It is. And it's becoming increasingly prevalent.
Now, the source material doesn't just describe this strategy. It also offers some guidance on how to apply it. But it comes with a really important warning.
Okay.
You can't just unleash chaos and hope for the best. You have to be strategic about it.
Right. You need to control the fear. Otherwise, it can backfire on you.
Right.
The goal is to create uncertainty and doubt, not to completely destroy everything.
And they use another historical example to illustrate this.
Okay.
The Cold War, which was essentially a decades-long standoff between the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Yeah, a war of nerves.
And both sides were constantly trying to outmaneuver each other by playing on each other's fears.
It was a very delicate balance of power.
And it led to a lot of paranoia and mistrust on both sides. Like there was constant surveillance, political purges. People were afraid of their own governments.
Yeah, fear became a tool of control.
And in a way, both sides ended up being victims of their own fear-mongering.
That's the danger.
Yes.
It can easily spiral out of control.
But the source material also makes it clear that fear alone isn't enough. You have to have real strength to back it up.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's just an empty threat. And it won't be effective in the long run.
You need substance behind the fear.
And they point to another historical example to drive this point home. The Reign of Terror during the French Revolution.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic cautionary tale.
So what happened there?
Well, the revolutionary government decided to use fear as a way to control the population. They started executing anyone they perceived as a threat. And it created this atmosphere of absolute terror. But it quickly spiraled out of control. The paranoia and the violence just kept escalating. And eventually, the people who had instigated the terror, they became victims of it themselves.
So it's like the fear they had unleashed, it ended up consuming them.
That's right. It's a reminder that fear is a dangerous weapon, and it needs to be handled with extreme care.
So what are some of the practical steps for applying this strategy in a way that's effective, but also doesn't backfire?
Well, the source material outlines a few key things. First, you need to identify your enemy's weaknesses.
Okay,
Figure out what they're most afraid of, and then target those fears.
makes sense.
Then you want to use psychological warfare tactics to plant seeds of doubt and uncertainty. This could involve spreading rumors, leaking false information, or even just creating a general sense of unease.
So it's all about manipulating perception.
Exactly.
What else then?
Well, timing is crucial. You want to strike when your enemy is least expecting it. That way the fear will be amplified.
So surprise is a key element.
Absolutely.
And then once you've created that initial shock, you need to let the fear spread naturally.
Right.
People start talking, rumors will spread, and the panic will take on a life of its own. But here's the crucial part. You can't just let it run wild. You have to maintain some level of control.
That's right.
Otherwise, the chaos could become overwhelming. And it could end up hurting you as much as your enemy. So it's a delicate balancing act.
It is.
You know, it's funny, but this whole idea of sowing uncertainty and panic, it even shows up in something as mundane as marketing.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Think about all those ads that play on FOMO.
Fear of missing out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They create this sense of scarcity or urgency to make you feel like you have to buy their product right now, or you'll miss out on something amazing.
It's a very effective tactic.
And it works because it taps into our primal fears. The fear of being left behind, the fear of not being part of the in crowd. It's pretty brilliant when you think about it.
It is. From a marketing perspective, at least.
But it's also a little bit manipulative. I mean, they're deliberately trying to make you feel anxious. So you'll buy their product.
That's the goal.
So I guess the takeaway here is that fear is a powerful tool, but it's a double-edged sword. It could be used for good or for evil. And it's up to us to be aware of how it's being used and to make sure that we're not being manipulated by it.
Absolutely. We need to be critical thinkers and not let our fears control us.
All right, so to wrap things up, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive into Strategy 33?
I think the key insight here is that uncertainty and panic can be incredibly powerful weapons, and they don't require brute force. Often the most effective way to win is to make your enemy defeat themselves.
And that's what this strategy is all about.
Exactly. It's about understanding the psychology of fear and using it to your advantage.
So for you, the listener, next time you're facing a challenge, whether it's a business negotiation or a personal conflict, think about how you might be able to use this strategy. Maybe you don't need to go in guns blazing. Maybe a more subtle approach, one that plays on your opponent's fears, could be the key to victory.
It's definitely worth considering.
It's all about being strategic and understanding the power of fear.
Absolutely.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. I think we've all learned a lot.
I know I have.
And I hope you have too. Until next time.
Stay safe out there.
And remember, sometimes the greatest weapon is the one you never have to use.
That's the truth.